Grazzi Vicky, bonġu l-kulħadd. Wara Yves, ħanerġa' naqleb għall-Ingliż, ma ċabxulix imma I prepared it in English. Vicky talbit nitkellem dwar il-libertà tal-espressjoni. When I think about free expression, we have a number of fundamental rights: the right to property, the right to life, the right to fair trial. But I like to think of the right to free expression as being the queen amongst all of these, because it is the only one that gives us the right to challenge authority, to call power to account. So, the right to free expression is a bit of a canary in the coal mine. If you want to see the state of a state's democracy, look at its freedom of expression. If freedom of expression is under threat or is being suppressed in any way, invariably that democracy is on its way out. So it is crucial in the state that we are of reviewing ourselves and taking an inward look at what we can do and what we can change, that we look at how free expression can be bolstered and can be revised and can be brought up to date. And over here I have four, without getting too granular on the details, I have four ideas which I wish to push forward to you. And the first of these is the question of press law. In 2018, we had a revision of press law. We had the Foreign Press Act, and that was turned into the Media and Defamation Act. And I'm just going to come in with a little anecdote over there. I remember at the time, as MITLA, the Malta IT Law Association, we had met with the drafters of the law. You may remember that there was the whole proposal of having websites registered with the commissioner, which was absolutely crazy. We had met over there, and we also met with the Institute of Journalists. And one of the things that shocked me most when we met the journalists was their fear of ever facing a libel suit. And their fear of ever facing a libel suit basically meant, and it still goes on today, you read news reports which are basically cut and paste jobs of press releases issued by the DOI. There is no motivation, there is no desire to push the envelope and to question authority more than you perhaps should. And our push as lawyers at the time, we pushed again and said, why are you taking this attitude? So let me come to the proposal over here. Yes, we have a press law. Yes, it is functional, but it needs to go further. And it needs to go further in two ways, I see. One is the outlawing of slap suits, slap being suits that are simply done purely to create barriers in people expressing themselves, in journalists expressing themselves. And the second is, I think we should come in with the idea of creating penalties for plaintiffs, for claimants, who file suits frivolously, knowing that they will eventually lose them. The time has come to put your money where your mouth is. If you're going to file a libel suit, then you should be prepared to pay a penalty, a discretionary penalty, which will be in the hands of the judge or the magistrate hearing the case. If you lose that case because you've known from the beginning that you were going to lose it, then you should put your money where your mouth is and be forced to pay those damages. And that should create some sort of barrier in As I said, when we met the journalists, it was one journalist fearing one libel suit. I hate to think what Daphne must have been like when she was facing close to 50 at one point. The punitive financial cost that puts you through puts things in an entirely different perspective. I'll move on to my second point, and the second point is it was something that Manuel touched on before, and that is the question that we have with the broadcast landscape here in Malta. Whereas in other countries, you started off with a pluralistic press, and then political parties came along. In Malta, because of our colonial experience, we've had exactly the opposite. We've had political parties and a pluralistic media landscape which came around in the 90s and which was gobbled up by the political parties. And to me, it's something bone-chilling when I read in this week's newspapers that for the first time, One TV has surpassed TVM in its listenership. So it's taken over the radio landscape many years ago, and now it has done so in the TV broadcast section as well. We essentially have propaganda machines. We do not have, it is false to look at these as being a free media landscape. They are essentially two propaganda machines, and you have the state broadcast somewhere dancing in between, and also a victim of the winner-takes-all situation that we have in most state organizations or state entities, and this needs to stop. It needs to stop because we need to bolster primarily the broadcasting authority, which acts as the regulator in these sort of things. Again, it is untenable that we have a constitutional body where it's simply an extension of the government. When you have the broadcasting authority and state broadcaster working in such close tandem, we cannot hope to have media objectivity in Malta. And therefore, this is one area which definitely needs attention and reform. The third point, I'm going to have to look here. The third point I had was earlier this summer, I was training one of the media houses. I was training the journalists in various legal aspects. And I discovered a blind spot that I wasn't aware of, and that is the shockingly huge amount of freedom of expression, freedom of information requests that are turned down by every journalist who forwards them to the government departments in question. It's shocking. The numbers are truly shocking. Out of every 10 requests that are submitted, you may get a reply on maybe 2. So this is a huge shortcoming that we have, where we have, as Mr. Parch mentioned before, laws on paper which are not exactly being observed. Part of the problem with our Freedom of Information Act is, again, its politicization. The fact that when you come up with appeals towards these, one, they are taking too long. It's of no use if I wanted to know something last August and I get a decision next March. That horse has long bolted. So, again, it's one of these areas of law where the right to freedom of information is ultimately a right of each one of us. It doesn't just belong to journalists. So it's another area that needs reform in that sense. The last point I had, again, overlaps very closely with what Manuel said before, and that is that our education system has failed us. Why do I say this? I say this because the way I see our challenges in the 21st century aren't so much problems of us being able to express ourselves. We have many soapboxes on which we can climb onto. I think the main challenge that we are about to face, and we are facing already, is that of misinformation, where we have entities such as Facebook which are willfully saying, listen, I'm very happy to take on adverts from politicians even if I know it contains fake information. How do we counter this? I think we have to counter this by looking at our own education system and by creating critical thinkers. If we continue raising zombies who cannot distinguish, who cannot evaluate information, who cannot make normal choices, who cannot make rational choices on the basis of the information before them, then we are destined to fail. We are destined to create adults who vote like sheep, who think like sheep, and who applaud when something is manifestly wrong. So our education system needs to engender critical thinking from a very young age. It's going to take a generation to do this, but we need to start somewhere. Thank you.